The lantern room fell silent when I placed the folder beside my mother's untouched glass of red wine. After 24 years of being the daughter nobody mentioned, I was suddenly sitting in a private dining room with 15 relatives staring at me. My mother had just told them I ran away from the family, then came crawling back only to grab my grandmother's estate. My twins sat near the far wall, pale and hollow, staring at her napkin. My father kept grinding his teeth as if the truth were lodged in his mouth. I rested my palm on the folder and waited. What I took from it that night is why my parents have not contacted me since. But the road to that table began on the evening they decided one child was worth keeping and the other was a bad investment. That was the unfairness sitting at the table before I ever touched a page. They had erased me as a child, spent money meant for both daughters, told my sister I had abandoned her, and then expected me to sign away the only protection my grandmother left me because my mother could still make her voice shake on command. They had chosen the restaurant, the guest list, the pressure, even the pen. What they had not chosen was the evidence. They did not know Ruth had kept what they thought time had buried. Before my mother could give the room her version of me, I need to tell you mine. My name is Natalie Brooks. I am a large animal veterinarian in Cedar Hollow, Minnesota, a town of about 5,000 people and far more cows than stoplights. I get called to barns when the roads are glazed over and the sky is still black. I have pulled calves while snow blew through gaps in the boards and held pressure on wounds that would make most people sit down fast. So when someone asks whether confrontation frightens me, I usually laugh. Blood is honest. Pain is honest. The thing that scares me is a person who can smile gently while rewriting your entire childhood. My husband, Eric Miller, repairs farm equipment and runs 52 leased acres through the North Ridge Dairy Cooperative. Our daughter, Ava Miller, is 8 and asks questions like a cross-examining attorney. Our son, Nolan Miller, is 5 and believes every stray dog was sent by God specifically for him. We are not wealthy. We are steady. We have a porch that smells like muddy boots, a kitchen table with scratches in it, and a life I built without a single nail from the people who gave birth to me. I used to think peace meant forgetting. It does not. Peace means a phone can ring from an old area code, and you can still feel your knees lock, but you no longer mistake that feeling for obligation. By the time my mother called, I had learned how to answer emergencies, how to balance payroll, how to tell a farmer his favorite cow was not going to make it, and how to tuck my own children into bed without leaving them wondering whether love depended on performance. I had learned every skill my parents never valued because none of those skills came with a trophy. For years, I believed that was enough. I had stopped waiting. I had stopped wondering. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, while I was at the clinic sink scrubbing iodine from under my fingernails, my phone lit up with a Nebraska number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it. Something about the way it kept ringing made me dry my hands on my jeans and answer. There was a pause, just breathing, then a voice I had not heard in nearly a quarter of a century. "Natalie, sweetheart, it's your mother." I stared at the white tile in front of me. Valerie Brooks did not call me sweetheart. Valerie Brooks did not call me at all. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and wet dog, and suddenly the whole room seemed to tip a few inches sideways. I knew before she said another word that whatever she wanted, it was not me. You never forget the night your own parents remove you from your life. I was 11. It was late April, warm enough that the windows were open, and there was a suitcase sitting by the front door. I remember thinking it belonged to someone else because nobody had told me to pack. Then I saw my folded sweaters inside it. Dinner sat untouched on the stove. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans my mother had overcooked until they were gray. She called me to the table in the careful voice adults use when they have already made a decision and want you to behave while they tell you. "Natalie, you're going to stay with Uncle Harold for a little while." A little while. I grabbed onto those words with both hands. I asked how long that meant. My father, Dennis Brooks, was standing by the counter with his arms folded. He did not look angry. That made it worse. Anger at least means somebody is feeling something. He only looked tired of a problem. "We'll see," he said. My twin sister, Lauren Brooks, was upstairs working with her math coach. That month she had won a regional science competition, and our refrigerator was covered in ribbons, newspaper clippings, and photographs of her holding a trophy with both hands. A brand new desk had appeared in her room, along with a lamp, a microscope kit, and a sense that the future had finally chosen a daughter. I was not bad. I need that understood. I did my homework. I got decent grades. I drew animals in the margins of worksheets. I forgot spelling words sometimes and froze during timed math tests. But I did not steal, scream, run away, or set anything on fire. I was simply ordinary. In the Brooks house, ordinary had become the same as useless. Uncle Harold's pickup rolled into the driveway around 7:30. My mother walked me outside with her hand hovering at my back, barely touching me, as if a firmer touch would make the act too real. She kissed my hair and told me to be good for Harold. Then she turned around and went back into the house before his truck was even out of the driveway. I watched the kitchen window as we backed away. The light inside was soft and yellow. Through it, I saw my mother lift the meat loaf from the stove and scrape it into the trash, already cleaning up after the life I had been cut out of. I still believed, sitting beside my uncle in that rattling truck, that they would come for me after everyone calmed down. They never did. Lauren was not there to see the suitcase leave. That mattered later. She did not see my mother check the zipper twice as if she had packed for summer camp. She did not hear me ask whether I should take my school books or whether I would be back by Monday. She did not see my father pick a piece of lint from his sleeve while I stood in the hallway trying not to cry. In the story my mother later told, I was already half gone before they helped me out the door. In real life, I stood there waiting for one of them to change their mind until Harold finally lifted the suitcase himself. The only way to understand what happened later is to understand the arithmetic my parents lived by. They had twin daughters, and somewhere along the way they stopped seeing us as children and started seeing us as competing funds. Lauren tested into the gifted track in 2nd grade. I did not. From then on, money, attention, time, and pride ran in one direction. Lauren got tutors, summer science camps, piano lessons she later abandoned, robotics clubs, private testing, and every tool my parents believed genius required. I got discount clothes, a library card, and instructions not to interrupt. Nobody slapped me. Nobody called me worthless to my face. That is why it took me so long to name it. Cruelty with manners leaves bruises in places nobody checks. My mother had a wound of her own, and she fed it until it became the house's central religion. She had been accepted into a chemistry doctoral program the year she became pregnant with us. She never went. She spoke of that letter like it was a war medal and a funeral notice in the same envelope. Lauren became the life Valerie believed the world had stolen from her. Every award Lauren brought home made my mother stand a little straighter. I became the cost. My father owned a small manufacturing shop, Prairie Gear Works, and he measured everything in yield and loss. One night when I was 10, I lay on my bedroom floor with my ear near the heating vent because sound carried up from the kitchen. My mother had asked him whether maybe they were giving Lauren too much and me too little. For a second, I thought she might save me. Then my father answered in that flat business voice of his. "We can only back one future, Valerie. Split the resources and we ruin them both." I stayed flat against the carpet until my cheek went numb. That was how I learned my worth had been calculated, compared, and rejected before I was old enough to understand the numbers. The suitcase by the door came later. The decision was already made. Once you have been ranked inside your own house, you learn the signs. I knew which questions not to ask when catalogs arrived for summer programs. I knew not to mention field trips that cost money. I knew that if Lauren forgot her lunch, my mother would drive it to school, but if I forgot mine, I would learn responsibility. I knew praise in that house was not a language everyone received. It was a spotlight, and it had one bulb. The strangest part is that I loved Lauren then. I loved her because she was my twin before she was their project. We had shared a crib, chicken pox, secret jokes, and a fear of the basement stairs. I did not resent her gifts at first. I resented the way adults turned those gifts into proof that I deserved less. Children can survive difference. What breaks them is being told difference is value. Harold Brooks was my father's older brother, though they had not been close in years. Harold had left the city to run dairy cattle, and Dennis considered that a surrender of ambition. Sending me to Harold let my parents pretend I had gone somewhere smaller, somewhere that matched what they thought I was. The farm sat 38 minutes outside Cedar Hollow. For the first 7 days, I buried my face in bedding that carried cedar shavings and unfamiliar laundry soap. Harold and his wife, June Brooks, never pushed me to talk. June simply set a third plate at dinner as if I had always belonged there. Harold knocked on my door before sunrise during my second week and said, "Heifer's struggling. You can watch or stay in bed." I watched. I stood in a barn holding a flashlight while a young cow strained on fresh straw. Harold spoke to her in a low, steady voice, not soft, exactly, but respectful. When the calf finally came, slick and stunned, and shook its head under the yellow beam of my flashlight, something inside me loosened. I did not know yet that I was seeing the shape of my own future. June taught me that food is not a reward for perfect behavior. Harold taught me that you drive through sleet at 2 in the morning for a creature that cannot explain where it hurts. Neither of them ever made me feel like a line item. After that first year, I no longer jerked away every time an adult reached toward me. The farm did not heal me quickly. Healing is not a montage. I still waited for headlights some evenings. I still sat with the phone on my lap and imagined my mother calling to say there had been a mistake. I still made myself easy to keep, clearing dishes before June asked, folding towels perfectly, answering every adult with yes ma'am and no sir. June noticed. She would take the towel from my hands and say, "You live here, Natalie, you don't have to earn supper." I never knew what to do with that, so I usually went quiet. Harold was not gentle in a storybook way. He was practical. He showed me where the boots were, how to latch a gate, how to keep my fingers clear of a nervous cow's kick. He did not ask me to talk about my parents. He gave me chores that mattered, then trusted me to do them. That trust did more for me than sympathy would have. It made me useful without making me expendable. Behind the old milk shed, I made the kind of fierce promise children make because they do not know how long a lifetime is. I promised myself I would never need my parents again. I would build a life so solid they could not pry out a single board. For 24 years, I kept that promise. What I had not planned for was the day they came back not for one board, but for the whole house. The only person who had prepared me for it was the one woman I thought had merely been kind from a distance. Work saved me before I knew it was work. By 13, I could hold a vein for Harold. By 15, I knew when a cow was just restless and when something was truly wrong. Animals did not compare me to Lauren. They did not care about ribbons or test scores. They needed me calm, patient, and present. I could do that. Somewhere between mucking stalls and reading borrowed veterinary textbooks at the kitchen table, I decided I would become a vet. Once I saw it, I ran toward it with everything I had. But the cards are what still hurt in the tenderest way. Several times each year, mail arrived at the farm with Ruth's looping, old-fashioned handwriting on the front. Inside was a card, sometimes a $10 bill, sometimes a pressed leaf or a photograph. Each message closed with the same small promise, "With love, Grandma." Ruth Brooks was my father's mother. Against the current of that family, she refused to let me disappear. She never wrote that my parents were wrong. She never called them cruel. She did not have to. The cards themselves said enough. While my parents lived as if I had evaporated, Ruth kept one thin thread tied between me and the family I came from. I wrote back about barn cats, lame horses, calves with ridiculous names. She wrote back asking after each one like they were parishioners. When I got into veterinary school, her card said only, "Of course you did." I still have it. Ruth's cards were small, but they arrived with the force of weather. Birthdays, Thanksgiving, sometimes a random Tuesday in August. She would write about the maple tree outside her window or a recipe she thought June might like, then ask what I was reading, whether the old barn cat still limped, whether school had gotten any easier. She used questions like a bridge. She never demanded that I cross it, but she kept it standing. For a long time, I believed that was all her cards were. Mercy from an old woman in a senior apartment 2 towns over. I did not know she was watching more closely than anyone. I did not know she was keeping dates, papers, bank slips, and photographs in a wooden box. I did not know there was so little time left to ask her why. The good years came, and I want to give them their space. I finished vet school carrying more debt than seemed reasonable for one human back, and I came home to Cedar Hollow because it was the first place that had ever held me. I worked for Dr. Walter Hayes until his knees gave out, bought half his practice, then the rest. I met Eric Miller at a farm supply store when his truck battery died and mine had jumper cables. We were married in Harold's South pasture. June made it onto the dance floor, moving slowly and carefully, and cancer took her 4 months afterward. Ava arrived later. Then Nolan. A practice, a husband, 2 children, an uncle whose hair went white but whose eyes still missed nothing. My life looked small from the highway and enormous from inside it. I did not send my parents' graduation photos. I did not send wedding invitations, birth announcements, Christmas cards, or angry letters. It was not punishment. It was survival. I had built my life with no doors facing Nebraska, and I liked the quiet. Grandma Ruth knew anyway. Through cards, phone calls, and the occasional report she coaxed out of Harold, she knew the children's names, Eric's bad jokes, the clinic's growth, the way Ava hated peas and Nolan slept with a stuffed border collie. In her final Christmas card, she wrote, "You made a life they cannot portion out." I smiled at the strange wording and tucked it into a drawer. 3 months later, a nurse called from Ruth's assisted living facility. The number was still saved in my phone under June because June had once used it during Ruth's move. I answered expecting some old billing question and heard a stranger's soft, professional voice. Ruth had suffered a stroke. If I wanted her to know I was there, I needed to come quickly. I walked out of the clinic before the iodine had fully dried on my wrists. The facility was 42 minutes beyond Cedar Hollow. I made it in 31. Ruth's room smelled of lavender lotion, warm plastic, and floor cleaner. She looked tiny against the white sheets. The stroke had dragged one corner of her mouth down, yet the moment her gaze landed on me, it cleared. Her good hand lifted. I took it. "Nat," she said. Only Harold and Ruth called me that. I said I had made it. I begged her to stop using her breath on words. "Save your strength," I told her, because people say useless things when they know strength is already slipping away. She squeezed my fingers hard enough to stop me. "The box," she whispered. I leaned closer. "Wooden box, my old place, top closet." Her assisted living room had replaced the senior apartment months before, but she still called it her place. I told her I would find it. "There are things," she said, every word scraped out of her. "Things you need after. Open it yourself. Promise. Don't let Dennis touch it." I promised instantly. I would have promised anything. She studied me for several seconds, and the side of her mouth that still obeyed her tried to form a smile. "Good," she breathed. "Now they can't ration you." That word again. I asked what she meant, but her eyes drifted toward the window and her hand softened in mine. A nurse came in, checked the monitor, and put on the blank, gentle face people in that work learn to wear. Ruth slept after that. Then the sleep deepened. She died 4 days afterward. The question about the box stayed unanswered. But I had promised, and promises are one of the few things I know how to keep. The funeral was small because Ruth had wanted it that way. A few women from her church, 2 staff members from the care home who had truly liked her. Harold leaning on a cane, Eric beside me. My parents did not come. Lauren did not come. 24 years of distance, and they still could not drive 4 hours to bury the woman who had raised my father. I told myself that did not surprise me. Mostly, it did not. What surprised me was Teresa Whitman. Teresa is my mother's younger sister, 62 years old and composed almost entirely of curiosity she calls concern. She arrived in a black wool coat, dabbed at dry eyes. and within minutes had steered me toward the coffee table in the funeral parlor. "Such a loss," she said, looking not at Ruth's photograph but at me. "She became very private near the end, didn't she? Did she ever get her affairs arranged?" I stared at her. Teresa lowered her voice to the tone people reserve for money. "Valerie only wonders who is handling the house and accounts. Family should know these things." There it was. My grandmother had not yet been buried, and my parents had already sent a scout. I told her Ruth's attorney was handling everything. The word attorney hit Teresa like a dropped dish. She recovered quickly and patted my arm. "Well, I'm sure fairness will prevail." Her voice said she planned to help fairness find the right address. She stepped away on clicking heels, no doubt searching for reception and a person to report to. I stood beside the coffee urn with a paper cup going cold in my hand and understood the shape of the next storm. The family that had misplaced me for 24 years had suddenly remembered I existed. The question was not whether they wanted something. The question was how much they believed Ruth had left behind. Ruth's lawyer was Priya Coleman, and her office sat above a pharmacy in Cedar Hollow. The radiator clicked and popped under the window like it was commenting on the meeting. Priya had silver-streaked hair pinned at the back of her head, reading glasses on a chain, and the settled calm of a woman who had watched too many relatives discover greed at the same time they discovered grief. She slid a folder across her desk. "Your grandmother was exact," she said. "And careful, before we discuss numbers, you need to understand this was not done in haste." Ruth had left me most of her estate. The assisted living room held little. But she still owned her old house, a neat 2-bedroom she had rented for years, and a savings account she had added to with quiet discipline. When Priya named the total, sound seemed to leave the room for a second. It was not billionaire money. But to a rural veterinarian with student loans, a mortgage, and 2 children, it was a different weather system. Priya was not finished. She set 2 items on the desk. One was a sealed letter with Natalie written across the front in Ruth's hand. The other was a wooden box with a scratched lid polished smooth from use. "She instructed that you open both privately," Priya said. She also included a no-contest clause. "I rarely draft them unless a client has a specific fear. Anyone who challenges the will and loses forfeits whatever smaller gift they were left." "Who did she expect to challenge it?" I asked. Priya looked at me over her glasses. She did not name names. She only told me to make sure the language was airtight, and to make sure the estate went to you. I drove home with Ruth's letter on the passenger seat and the wooden box on the floorboard. I did not open either one in the truck. I wanted the right kind of quiet. Priya also made me slow down when my first instinct was to ask how soon I could give everything back just to avoid a fight. That is what old conditioning does. It teaches you that peace means surrendering before anyone raises their voice. Priya slid a yellow legal pad toward me and said, "Before you make any decision from fear, write down what you actually want." I wrote, "My children safe, my practice stable, Harold left alone, Ruth respected, no more lies." Money came later on the list. That told me something. The Nebraska number rang again almost as soon as I put Ruth's envelope on my kitchen counter. I watched 2 rings pass, chose the version of myself I could live with, and answered. My mother's voice poured through, warm and thick. "Natalie, sweetheart, I've been thinking about you nonstop. Losing your grandmother reminded us all that life is too short. Your father and I have so many regrets." I said nothing. Silence makes dishonest people fill in their own blanks. "We were not perfect," she continued. "No parent is, but you are our daughter, and I would love for us to start fresh, put the past where it belongs." She let that sit for a heartbeat before sliding in the real request. "We're planning a family dinner, everyone together. You, Lauren, the aunts, cousins, a clean start. Will you come?" People like to believe they would hang up in that moment. Maybe some would. But 24 years can carve out a hollow place where a mother is supposed to be. Some young, wounded part of me leaned toward the warmth before the adult in me noticed the timing. Ruth had been dead less than 3 weeks. The estate had just been read. And suddenly, my parents had discovered regret, perspective, family, healing. People do not get sentimental on schedule, they get strategic on deadline. "What changed?" I asked, the smallest pause. We're all getting older, my mother said. And family helps family. Help. There it was, waiting under the syrup. I told her I would think about it. Before she hung up, she said she loved me. The words landed like a coin tossed into a cup. I stood in my kitchen staring at Ruth's sealed letter and thought, whatever is inside that box, I need to understand it before I take a seat at a table my mother set. I called Priya before coffee the next morning. I explained the invitation, the new tenderness, and the shape of the performance. She went quiet in the careful way professionals do when they are sorting legal advice from human concern. Natalie, the simple answer is that the estate is yours. The will is solid. You owe no one money, consent, or explanation. The harder answer is that solid does not mean painless. Your parents can still file a challenge. They may lose, but they can create months of expense, subpoenas, letters, gossip, and pressure while the court handles it. What do I do? Document everything. Do not sign anything. Do not discuss terms in public. And if you attend this dinner, do not put your name on a single piece of paper. I wasn't planning to. People who arrange dinners like this, she said, are often arranging more than dinner. After we hung up, a text appeared from an unsaved number. I knew it before I admitted I knew it. Lauren, I know this is strange. Can we meet, just us? Not mom and dad, please. I looked at that word for a long time. Please did not sound like a trap. It sounded like a person knocking from inside one. Against my better judgment, I wrote back, when? We met at a coffee shop halfway between Cedar Hollow and the town where my parents lived, a place neutral enough to feel like a border crossing. I nearly walked past her. The Lauren I remembered had been straight-backed, bright-eyed, certain. The woman at the corner table looked too thin inside her coat, her face drawn tight, her hands unable to settle. We faced each other like strangers built from the same blueprint. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she gave a small, cracked laugh. You look like you survived. Why did you text me? I asked. She wrapped both hands around her paper cup. Her story came out in pieces. The education technology company my parents had funded, bragged about, and used as proof of her brilliance had folded 16 months earlier. There had been investors, guarantees, debts. Her marriage had not survived the pressure. She was 35 and living in our parents' basement, which she described as a punishment with laundry privileges. I expected to feel satisfaction. I did not. I felt the way I feel when I find an injured animal trying not to show weakness. Recognition first, judgment later if ever. Then she said, I wondered about you all the time. I looked up. When we were kids, she said. After you left, I asked Mom where you went. She told me you chose to stay with Uncle Harold. She said you liked farm life better and didn't want to come home. I lowered my cup carefully before my hand betrayed me. Lauren, I said, I did not choose anything. I was 11. They filled a suitcase with my clothes and sent me away in Harold's pickup. She went completely still. Some old support beam inside her seemed to split. That isn't what she told me, she whispered. In that strip mall coffee shop, I understood that my parents had not only removed me, they had replaced me with a lie and handed that lie to my twin. I drove from the coffee shop straight to Ruth's old house, which was empty between tenants. The key was cold in my fingers. The wooden box was exactly where Priya's note said it would be. Highest shelf in the bedroom closet, folded inside one of Ruth's blue scarves. I brought it back to the small kitchen table. The house smelled faintly of dust and lemon oil. I opened the letter first because I had promised, and because I needed Ruth's voice before I faced whatever else she had left. Then I lifted the lid. Photographs lay on top. Me at 6, missing front teeth, hair in uneven braids. Lauren and me in matching spring dresses, two identical little girls before the world started separating us into winter and waste. A few photos of me as a teenager on Harold's farm, ones June must have sent without telling me. Ruth had been keeping proof that I continued to exist. Under the photographs, the box changed from memory to evidence. There were bank statements, old paper with perforated edges, a soft manila envelope, notarized documents, copies of checks, notes in Ruth's hand. My grandmother, the woman who sent cards with $10 bills, had been building something far more deliberate than affection. This was not a keepsake box, it was a case file. There were little notes clipped to some of the statements in Ruth's handwriting. Not accusations, just facts. Transfer requested by Dennis. Check deposited into Lauren's school account. No corresponding payment for Natalie. Ruth had not editorialized because she had not needed to. She had understood that clean documentation is harder to dismiss than outrage. Each note felt like her sitting beside me saying, "I saw it. I saw you. I did not forget." My hands were steady. I have delivered calves during lightning storms. Paper does not make me tremble. But my heart understood before my mind did. Whatever lay in those pages was the thing Ruth meant when she said they could not ration me now. I started with the letter. "My dear Nat, if you are reading this, I am gone, and that means I can finally say what I should have said years ago. I failed you once by being quiet. I stood by while your parents made their decision and told myself a grandmother had no right to interfere. That silence has lived with me every day. I could not undo what they did, so I chose the only action left to me. I kept what they discarded. I kept the truth. There was money intended for both girls. Equally. I made sure of that when I had the power to do so. What happened to your half is in this box. I got the records properly because I contributed to the fund and had the right to ask. I am not leaving you the house and savings so you can become rich. I am leaving them so you never again be forced to sit before them asking permission to belong. That seat was yours from birth. They forgot. I did not. Use the box if they force you. Leave it closed if they leave you in peace. Either way, you are free. Stand tall. Love, Grandma Ruth." I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. The afternoon light stretched across the empty kitchen floor while I sat with the letter in my lap. During her final stretch on Earth, my grandmother had been stacking proof into a shield, page by page, for the day my family might come looking for me. And the family was coming. Here is what the records showed in plain language, because numbers can disguise cruelty if you let them. When Lauren and I were small, an education account had been opened for both of us. The Brooks Girls College Trust. Ruth contributed the largest share, other relatives added to it over the years, and a modest bequest from an older aunt was added too. It was meant for 2 daughters. 2. Deposits continued steadily until around the year I turned 12. Then, not long after I had been sent to Harold, the withdrawals began. Large ones: academic camps, private school tuition, math coaching, piano lessons, university deposits, all rooted toward Lauren. My half, the part connected to my name, the money that could have carried me through veterinary school without years of debt, was drained before my 16th birthday. They had not merely refused to spend money on me. They had taken money already set aside for me and poured it into the child they had chosen. I sat there a long time. I thought of nights in vet school when I calculated whether I could afford groceries and loan payments in the same week. I thought of Eric and me eating rice and beans at the same kitchen table for months because every extra dollar went toward debt. I remembered every time I had claimed the hardship made me stronger. The truth was simpler. Money had existed and my name was tied to it. My parents spent it while telling the world I chose to leave. I did not scream. I did not throw the box. I got steady. Harold taught me that when a birth goes wrong, panic wastes time. You line up what you know. You put your hands where they need to be. You pull when the moment comes. So I put the statements in order. I marked dates. I made copies. If my parents wanted dinner, I would come to dinner. But I would not come empty. I also understood something ugly about the invitation. If I refused, my mother would say I was too guilty to face everyone. If I came and became emotional, she would say I was unstable. If I came and stayed silent, she would put the agreement in front of me and call my silence consent. Every path they imagined ended with me smaller. The folder created a path they had not imagined. I could show up calm, refuse the script, and make the room carry the truth with me. 2 days later, I carried the box to Priya. She examined it with surgical attention, turning each page by the edges. When she opened the manila envelope, she went very still. "Do you know how Ruth obtained this?" "Through the bank," I said. She wrote that she had the right because she contributed. Priya nodded slowly. Then this is more than ugly family history. If both girls were named beneficiaries and one child's portion was shifted without her consent while she was a minor, there may be a claim. Depending on the account structure, it could be a breach of fiduciary duty or worse. In normal words. In normal words, if your parents attack Ruth's will, they do it while sitting on a much larger legal problem of their own. I looked at the box. I don't want to sue them. I am not telling you to. I am telling you that you came in here holding a shield, but there is also a blade in the same hand. Whether you use it is your choice. I want them to leave my family alone. Priya leaned back. Then make sure they understand that war with you is not painless. Calmly, clearly. Preferably with witnesses they respect. My phone buzzed on her desk, a text from my mother. So glad you're coming. Saturday the 21st at 6. The Lantern Room at Bramble and Rye. Everyone will be there, dress nicely. I read the message and lifted my eyes to Priya. She picked the stage, I said. I'll bring the facts. I did not go to that dinner because I was weak. I went because of where it was. Bramble and Rye was the only expensive restaurant in Cedar Hollow, and the Lantern Room was its private space for rehearsal dinners, anniversaries, and people who wanted witnesses without admitting they wanted witnesses. My parents were driving almost 4 hours into my town to perform in front of aunts, uncles, and cousins who had heard their version of me for 24 years. That version was simple. Natalie chose to leave. Natalie was difficult. Natalie turned her back on the family. Natalie came back for Grandma Ruth's money. Staying home would leave that version upright. If I went, I had one room, one table, and one night with the only audience my mother had ever cared about. Valerie's power had always been narrative control, so I would put paper on the table and let the story change hands. That week I built a folder, not a dramatic mountain of evidence. Priya warned me against theater. Just essentials, arranged in order. Copies of the bank records. Ruth's letter, copied while the original remained locked in Priya's safe. The trust confirmation. And one document Priya found on Thursday that turned the folder from defensive to dangerous. She called me into her office in a voice softer than usual. I looked for guardianship records, she said. When a child lives with a relative long-term, there is usually paperwork. I wanted to see what the paper said. She handed me a certified copy. The page recorded a voluntary guardianship transfer from the spring when I was 11. My mother's signature, my father's signature. Legal custody of Natalie Brooks transferred to Harold Brooks. Not emergency, not temporary, voluntary and indefinite. Priya tapped the lower section. Read the reason. In my father's square handwriting, the line said, parents unable to allocate sufficient resources to both minor children. Allocate sufficient resources. They had written it down for a notary. The lie my mother told Lauren, the lie that I chose Harold and preferred his farm, died under one sentence my parents themselves had signed. I had not left. I had been allocated away. My parents did not know I had that document. They believed the only record that existed was my mother's carefully polished story. They intended to walk into the Lantern Room and run the same script in front of the same trusting relatives. They believed I was empty-handed. That was the final mistake they made in my favor. I asked Priya for 3 certified copies because some part of me still feared paper could vanish if enough powerful people disliked it. She understood without making me explain. People who rely on confusion hate duplicates, she said, stamping each copy. I put one in the folder, one in my truck, and left one with her. That small act steadied me more than I expected. For once, the truth would not depend on my memory alone. The estate settlement was scheduled for Tuesday the 24th, 3 days after the dinner. Priya explained the timing until it became painfully clear. My parents' lawyer had sent a letter of intent to contest Ruth's will, suggesting undue influence over an elderly woman. They were accusing me of manipulating the grandmother they had not bothered to bury. They will lose, Priya said. Ruth documented her capacity and her reasons, but they want pressure before Tuesday. They want you to sign a voluntary agreement giving Lauren a share. Then the court never sees the education trust records unless you choose to bring them. The dinner was not reconciliation. It was a deadline maneuver. Get Natalie into a room. Surround her with family. Use 24 years of hunger and 15 pairs of eyes. Put a paper in front of her. Extract the signature before the law made Ruth's wishes final and before the bank records became a threat. They had 3 days. So did I. The whisper campaign started before I ever stepped into the restaurant. Teresa moved first. A cousin I had not spoken to since childhood called and stumbled through a conversation about how sad it was that Ruth had cut everyone out except me. Another aunt left a voicemail about my poor parents, who had supposedly worked so hard to reach me and found me focused on money. Teresa's version was tidy and poisonous. Natalie abandoned the family, manipulated a dying woman, and was now hoarding what should belong to everyone. That story worked because it protected the people telling it. If my mother had given away a daughter, then Teresa had spent years defending a woman capable of that. She could not afford the truth, so she got ahead of it. The old me would have called everyone. I would have explained, pleaded, corrected, sounded desperate, and looked exactly as guilty as they wanted. This time I let Teresa talk. Every relative she poisoned became another witness primed to look at me when I set the folder down. Teresa thought she was burying me. She was filling the room. The calls hurt less than I expected and more than I wanted. A cousin named Ethan Whitaker, who had once taught me how to skip stones, spoke to me like I was a stranger under investigation. An aunt who had sent Lauren graduation gifts every year of college told me Ruth must have been confused because she would never have excluded family. I wanted to ask where that belief had been when Ruth lay dying and nobody from Nebraska came. I did not. I wrote down the calls, the dates, the words, and put the notes with the rest of the paper. I fought paper with paper. Priya requested certified records from the bank confirming that both Lauren and I were named beneficiaries of the education trust, and that withdrawals had moved funds connected to my share into accounts for Lauren's schooling. Originals went into Priya's safe. Copies went into my folder. Then I made the hardest call. I told Lauren what I had found. The guardianship transfer, the reason in our father's handwriting, the trust, the money. The silence on the phone was long enough that I wondered whether she had hung up. I didn't know, she said finally. Her voice broke in the middle. Nat, I swear I didn't know about the money. I thought you didn't want. She stopped. I know, I said. I asked whether if the moment came she would tell only what she truly remembered. I'm staying under their roof, she whispered. Right now I don't have another place to go. I understand. I did. You do not ask someone drowning to hold your weight too. I did not demand a promise. That night my father called. It was the first time I had heard his voice in 24 years. No syrup, no trembling regret, just the same flat tone I remembered through the heating vent. Natalie, we need Saturday to be smooth. Your sister is in trouble. Family helps family. Your grandmother has already taken care of you. It is time to be reasonable about what is more than your fair portion. I let the silence sit. Then he said, we can only back one future. You understood that then, you can understand it now. There it was, not memory, not childhood distortion. The exact philosophy still alive in him after all those years. He said it like wisdom. I did not argue. I said, I heard you, Dad, I'll see you Saturday. After I hung up, I sat in my dark kitchen with the folder on the counter and felt something settle in me that was not rage. Rage burns too hot to last. This was colder and steadier. Certainty. For most of my life, one question had chewed quietly at me. Was it me? Was there something in me that made me easy to leave? After my father hung up, I replayed the call once in my head and realized he had not asked how I was. Not once. He did not ask about my husband, my children, my work, Harold, Ruth's final days, or what 24 years had done to me. He called a daughter he had not raised since childhood and opened with logistics. That told me everything about the dinner before I saw the folded agreement by my mother's plate. That phone call killed the question. There had never been anything wrong with me. There had been something wrong with the math. I added one more page to the folder that night, a few lines of what I would say if I needed to speak. Short, Plain. Harold used to say the cleanest cut is the one you do not saw at. I plan to cut once. Lauren called late Friday night. Her voice was low, like she was hiding in the basement. I can't stop remembering things, she said. Since you told me, none of it sits right anymore. She told me about a day a few months after I had been sent away. She had asked our mother why I never visited, why I never called, why I did not come home for birthdays. Valerie sat her down and said, Natalie chose to stay with Uncle Harold. She's happier there. She does not really want to be part of this family, honey. Some people are like that. Don't take it personally. Lauren believed her. She was 11. What child thinks her mother would invent a wound like that and hand it to her? She made me think you didn't love us, Lauren said. She was crying now. I thought you had abandoned me. All along you were the child who was, she could not finish. Thrown away. That is the part that still catches behind my ribs. Removing me was not enough. My mother had to recast me as the villain of my twins' childhood so no one left in that house would wonder whether they had done something monstrous. I told Lauren none of that was her fault. She had been a child given a lie by the person she trusted most. Then I asked, quietly, What will you do tomorrow? A long pause. I don't know, she said, but I don't think I can keep repeating their story. It was not everything. It was enough. The morning of the dinner, I worked like it was any other Saturday. A colic call at the Renner place. A herd check for mastitis. A barn cat with an abscess who objected to my existence with all 4 feet. Work steadied me because animals do not care about family drama. Either you help them or you do not. In the afternoon, I laid the folder on my bed and checked it one last time. First, the notarized guardianship transfer, with my father's reason visible. Second, the bank confirmation and statements showing deposits, withdrawals, and my share moving into Lauren's education. Third, Ruth's letter, copy only. Fourth, a printout of the few words I planned to say. No diary entries, no dramatic photos, no childhood sob story. Priya was right. The documents mattered because they were cold. Let facts do what emotion cannot. I dressed simply in black pants and a gray sweater June had knitted for me years earlier. I wanted her in the room, at least in thread. Eric stood by the door holding Nolan, who waved a crayon at me like a flag. Ava wrapped herself around my knees and whispered that I should be brave. That nearly undid me. Ava wanted to know whether the faraway grandparents were mean. I told her some grown-ups make choices that hurt people and then pretend the hurt belongs to somebody else. That was as much truth as an 8-year-old needed. Nolan asked whether they had dogs. I said I did not know. He thought about that and announced that people without dogs were probably lonely. Eric and I did not laugh until after the children were asleep. Keeping them home was the easiest hard decision I made. My parents had once used children as props in their private arithmetic. I would not bring mine into a room built for pressure. They deserved a Saturday evening of cartoons and macaroni, not a front row seat to the collapse of a lie older than they were. The children were not coming. I had made that decision early. Whatever happened in the lantern room, my kids would not be an audience for it. Eric wanted to go with me, and I loved him for that, but I needed him home, making sure the children came back to something steady. I had to enter that room by myself, not under the cover of wifehood, not behind motherhood. As the little girl who had watched the kitchen window from Harold's truck, now grown and carrying the truth. Eric kissed my forehead. Whatever happens in that room, you already have us. I leaned into him for 1 minute. Then I straightened and went to the truck. I was 2 blocks from Bramble and Rye when my phone vibrated against the cup holder. My mother had added me days earlier to a family group chat, probably to make the dinner look like inclusion instead of strategy. At a red light, I glanced down. Valerie had sent a message to the wrong thread. Once she signs Grandma's portion over to Lauren tonight, we can finally move on. Don't let her leave before the agreement is done. Be loving but firm. I read it twice while the light changed above me. There it was in my mother's own words, sent to 30 relatives and me by accident. The reconciliation, the fresh start, the family healing. Reduced to instructions, get the signature. I took a screenshot. A minute later, the message disappeared. Then came, sorry, wrong chat face with tears of joy, but you cannot unsend what people have already seen. And you cannot unsave what I had already saved. The car behind me honked. I drove into the lot, parked, and turned off the engine. For a moment I sat there looking at the screenshot. My folder had been enough. Now my mother had provided motive, timestamp, and audience. I picked up my bag and walked toward the restaurant. I need to step back to the night before because one more thing belongs here. After Lauren's call, I drove out to Harold's farm. He was 79, slower now, with hands bent from decades of cold mornings and difficult births. A hired man did most of the milking, but Harold still sat on the porch at dusk like the place needed him to watch it. I told him about Ruth's box, the money, the guardianship paper, the dinner. He listened without interrupting, turning his coffee mug between his palms. When I finished, he looked toward the pasture where Eric and I had married. Your father and I stopped being brothers the day he called about you, he said. He asked if I would take you like you were a cow he couldn't winter. I said yes before he finished because I knew he'd already decided. I wasn't going to let you go to strangers. I had to look away. Then Harold said, this farm's greatest blessing came from Dennis's worst failure as a father. He was not a man who made speeches. That one cost him. He added, family isn't the people who keep you when the numbers work. It's the people who never run the numbers. On that porch, I held on to him past the point where either of us knew what to do with our arms. Driving home through the dark, I understood that whatever happened at dinner, I had already been chosen by the people who mattered. The folder was only for the record. That was the woman who walked into the lantern room, not the runaway daughter, not the greedy granddaughter. A 35-year-old veterinarian with a folder in her bag, a screenshot on her phone, and nothing left to prove except to the 11-year-old still braced somewhere inside her chest. The private room was warm, low-lit, and too polished for comfort. A long table waited under a brass light fixture. The air smelled of garlic, butter, and expensive bread. My mother sat at the head in pearls, laughing at something as if she had not just texted an ambush to the wrong room. My father sat beside her, heavier than I remembered, jaw tight. Teresa watched the doorway like a guard dog. Aunts, uncles, cousins, spouses, the audience. Some glanced at me with the mild distaste reserved for a story they had already judged. Lauren sat at the far end, shoulders narrow inside a navy cardigan. She met my eyes once, then looked down. My mother rose with a glow that belonged on a stage. Natalie, sweetheart, you came. She hurried over and put her arms around me. I let her. My arms stayed loose at my sides. She smelled like the perfume from my childhood, powdery and sharp under the sweetness. Over her shoulder, I saw everyone watching, measuring. The cold daughter had arrived. Now they would warm her, corner her, and make her pay. I let my mother seat me. I put my bag by my chair with the folder inside. I placed my hands on the white tablecloth and waited. The table had been arranged with intention. I was placed near the middle, close enough for my mother to touch, far enough from Lauren that any private exchange between us would be obvious. Teresa sat where she could watch both the door and my face. My father had the seat beside my mother, the silent authority. Even the empty chair near the wall felt planned, a place for a coat, not escape. I noticed all of it because animals teach you to read a room before you enter it. Nervous bodies arrange themselves around danger. Small talk moved around me like a net. A cousin asked about my clinic with the strained brightness of someone pretending not to have heard I was greedy. An uncle said he had not seen me since I was about yay high, holding his hand at the height I had been before the suitcase. My mother laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny. The more she performed joy, the more certain I became that she was afraid. Harold had taught me something in Barnes. You do not rush a difficult delivery. You wait for the right opening, then pull in one clean motion. The meal arrived course by course, and the performance followed the same rhythm. My mother toasted family finding its way back. She told a tender, edited story about how hard the years had been while I was so far away and impossible to reach. A few relatives nodded. Teresa dabbed at one dry eye right on schedule. I ate my soup and said little. They mistook quiet for guilt. Over the main course, my mother turned the conversation. Lauren has had such a painful season, she said to the table, though her eyes were on me. The business collapse, the divorce, and some of us have been blessed in ways others have not. A soft glance in my direction, gentle as a blade. Grandma Ruth, bless her heart, was not entirely herself near the end. She made choices that hurt the family, but we can still repair that, tonight, together. There it was, Teresa murmured. It would be the right thing. My father set down his fork. Share what you were given, Natalie, make this decent. The whole room turned. 15 faces, most already expecting me to refuse and confirm every ugly thing they had heard. My mother extended her hand and tapped mine softly. We are not asking for much, only that you help your sister and sign a small agreement so the family can move on. She had brought a document. It lay folded beside her plate with a pen clipped to it. She had brought paperwork to my town and my table. She truly believed that the weight of all those eyes would make me sign. I studied the document. My hand moved toward my bag, but I left the zipper closed. First, I wanted her to say it, all of it, publicly. Why do you believe Ruth's will was unfair? I asked. My mother's face arranged itself into injured grace. She addressed the room as if the table were a jury. Because this girl chose to leave us, she said, voice trembling with practiced sorrow. She was young, yes, but she turned away from her family. We tried, we begged. Then, when Ruth became confused and vulnerable, Natalie reappeared and made sure she got everything. I hate saying it, but everyone here has a right to know what happened. What happened? She said that word 3 feet from the folder. A cousin shook his head at me. Someone clicked their tongue. Teresa folded her arms, satisfied. That was the moment I told you about at the beginning. The room silent. My mother accusing me of abandoning the family and stealing my grandmother's money. Lauren at the far end, too thin and looking nowhere. My father grinding his jaw, 24 years narrowed to one white tablecloth. I let the silence hold for one beat, then another. Then I lifted the folder from my bag and placed it beside my mother's wine glass. You're right, I said. Everyone here deserves the truth. Mine comes first. I opened the folder and removed the top sheet. This is a notarized guardianship transfer, I said. My voice stayed low. People lean in for quiet. It is dated the spring I was 11. It is signed by both of my parents. It transfers legal custody to Harold Brooks. The language is voluntary and indefinite. I slid the page to the center of the table. There is a section for reason. I looked at my father. Do you want to say your own words aloud, or should I do it for you? He did not move, so I read it. Parents unable to allocate sufficient resources to both minor children. The words sat in the room like something foul no one could pretend not to smell. I did not choose to leave, I said. I had been 11. My parents gave legal custody away after deciding there was room to support only one child. They put that in writing. One uncle lifted the page, brows climbing, then handed it down the table. My mother's smile hardened. That is completely out of context. We were under pressure. You cannot understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You told Lauren I chose it. You said I wanted Harold's farm and did not want this family. I turned toward my twin. Lauren, is that what she told you? Every face turned to her. My mother's eyes snapped toward Lauren with the look I remembered from childhood, the one that ended questions before they became dangerous. But Lauren was not 11 anymore. Her hands gripped the table edge. Her face was white, but her chin lifted a fraction. The document moved from hand to hand, and the room's certainty began to loosen. I took out the next pages. There is more. This is the Brooks Girls College Trust. It was opened when Lauren and I were little. Both of our names appeared on the account, funded by Grandma Ruth, contributions from family, and a modest bequest from an older aunt. It existed to educate 2 children. I laid the records across the cloth. Here are the deposits, here are the withdrawals. The pattern changes after I am sent away. The portion attached to my name is gone before my 16th birthday, used for Lauren's tutoring, private school, camps, and university costs. My voice did not rise. I paid for veterinary school with loans while money assigned to me was being spent on the daughter they kept. I looked at my parents. You did not just give me away, you spent me. The room went dead silent. Then my father did what men like him do when their logic is challenged. He defended it. "We made the responsible choice," he said, loud enough for everyone. "You don't pour resources into the weaker prospect. We could only back one future." My mother hissed, "Dennis." Too late, he had said it. The line from the vent, the line from the phone. Spoken now in front of the relatives whose respect he and Valerie had tried to preserve. One aunt pressed fingers to her lips. A cousin dropped the statement back onto the cloth like it had burned him. My father had authenticated the entire story in his own voice. No one reached for the agreement now. The folded paper by my mother's plate looked suddenly childish, like a prop from a play whose curtain had ripped. I saw my father's hand inch toward it once, then stop. The bank statements had changed the weight of every object on the table. A pen was no longer just a pen. A signature was no longer a family favor. It was the thing they had brought me there to harvest. Teresa tried to rescue the sinking thing. "This is absurd," she snapped, half rising from her chair. "Natalie has twisted old records. She came here to attack grieving parents. She poisoned Ruth and now she's putting on a show because she wants the money." She looked around for the chorus she had spent days preparing. Some faces wavered because comfort is seductive, so I took out my phone. "Teresa, you say I came here in bad faith. Let's see who planned tonight in bad faith." I opened the screenshot and read my mother's accidental text aloud. "Once she signs Grandma's portion over to Lauren tonight, we can finally move on. Don't let her leave before the agreement is done. Be loving but firm." I lifted my eyes. My mother sent that to the family group chat less than an hour ago, then deleted it. This dinner was not a reunion. It was a tactic for securing my signature before Tuesday's estate settlement. I handed the phone to the closest cousin. He read the screenshot, lost color, and sent it down the table. Teresa's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. One cousin looked from the phone to Teresa. "You told me Natalie came for Ruth's money. This says you were all trying to force her to sign." Teresa sat down hard. Her whisper campaign collapsed in the exact room she had filled. At the far end of the table, Lauren slowly stood. She shook so badly she had to place both palms flat on the table. My mother said her name in a low, warning tone. "Lauren, sit down, this is not the time." Lauren looked at her, then at me, then at everyone. "When we were 11, she said, voice cracking but continuing, "I asked Mom where Natalie went. I asked why she never came home. Mom told me Natalie chose to live with Uncle Harold. She said Natalie preferred the farm and had no real wish to belong to us anymore." Tears slid down her face. "I believed that for 24 years. I thought my sister left me. I thought she did not love us." She gestured toward the documents. "All along they had sent her away. They used her education money for me and let me blame her so I would never question them." She turned to our mother. "You did not only throw her out, you made me think she caused it. You took my sister out of my life and convinced me she had chosen to go." That broke my mother. The mask fell clean off. Valerie shot up from her chair, pearls trembling at her throat. Soft hostess voice vanished, replaced by something harsh enough to scrape paint. "After everything I gave up," she shrieked. "Do either of you know what I sacrificed? I lost my entire future for this family. I did what I had to do. Both of you are ungrateful." Her face flushed red. Her voice filled the room she had meant to control. The aunts and cousins she had performed for all her life finally saw the woman underneath the performance. I sat still, hands folded on the table, and let them watch. For years, I had imagined confronting my mother and hearing an apology. Then, later, I imagined hearing denial. What I did not imagine was watching the need beneath it all break open in public. She was not defending love. She was defending the bargain she had made with herself. That losing her academic future entitled her to spend one daughter and live through the other. The room saw it at the same moment I did, and that shared recognition was more final than any insult I could have delivered. When her breath finally failed, silence spread so completely that the light fixture seemed loud. I rose and returned each page to the folder with slow, deliberate hands. I did not gloat. Harold taught me not to dance over an animal that is already down. "I'm going to say this once," I said, "and then I'm going home to my children. I will not sign anything. Grandma Ruth's will is documented, valid, and final. On Tuesday, the estate closes in my name. I faced my father. The school fund is a different issue. My attorney has those records. What happens with that will be handled legally, not over dinner. You moved money connected to my name while I was a child. Before either of you speaks to me again, you should speak to your own lawyer. His face turned gray. He understood at last that the dinner meant to corner me had given me leverage he could not take back. Then I looked around the table. The rest of you were told a story for 24 years. I do not blame you for believing people you trusted. I blame the people who lied. I picked up the folder. Mom, you managed what this family believed about me for my entire life. Tonight that ended. That is not revenge. It is simply the shape of things after a lie collapses. My mother folded back into her chair. Teresa stared at her plate. Several cousins looked anywhere but at each other. The performance was over, and the room knew it. Only one person was left for me to speak to. Lauren stood at the end of the table, crying, shaking, free, and homeless in the same breath. I walked to her. Part of me wanted to pull her into my life and fix everything. That old part of me still overfunctions when someone is hurting. But rescuing someone is not the same thing as respecting them. So I did not offer her money. I did not offer to become another place for her to collapse. I took one of Priya Coleman's cards from my pocket. I had brought it for this. I put it in Lauren's hand. This is my attorney, I told her. Not for Ruth's estate, for you. If you need a lawful way out of their basement and a path to support yourself, call her. She knows where to start. Lauren stared at the card. I am so sorry, Nat, for everything. You were a child handed a lie. You do not need to apologize for believing it. She cried harder. I said what I had decided on the drive over. When you can stand on your own feet, not theirs and not mine, call me as my sister. Not for money. Not to be saved. As my sister, I want that. First, you need solid ground under you. I have spent enough of my life being someone's spare cost. I won't make you mine. She nodded, gripping the card like it was the first solid object she had touched in years. I squeezed her shoulder once, said good night to the stunned room, and walked out of the lantern room into the cold dark of my own town. I did not look back. On the drive home, my hands shook for the first time all night. Not from fear anymore, but from release. I pulled over once near the feed mill because I did not trust myself to keep driving while my body caught up with what my voice had done. Then I laughed, one sharp sound in the dark truck, because somewhere a farmer was probably asleep believing I was a sensible woman who only dealt with sensible emergencies. I wiped my face, though I had not noticed crying, and went home. Eric was waiting in the kitchen with the porch light on and a mug of tea going cold between his hands. I did not give him a speech. I put the folder on the table, leaned into him, and said, "It's done." He held me until the shaking stopped. Upstairs, Ava coughed in her sleep and Nalin rolled into the wall with a thump. Ordinary sounds. Sacred sounds. The kind of life no one in that dining room had the power to ration. The estate settled that Tuesday exactly as Ruth had arranged. Once my parents' attorney learned about the guardianship document, the bank records, and the group chat screenshot, the intent to contest vanished. No courtroom battle followed. Ruth's penalty clause held, and the house and savings transferred to me without another hand reaching in. What happened at dinner traveled through the family in that familiar silent loud way people call not gossiping. The cousins Teresa had recruited called one by one, awkward and ashamed. An aunt mailed a short handwritten note. Teresa went silent, and from what I heard later, her invitations became fewer. A person can spend years lending her credibility to a lie, but the bill eventually comes due. My mother tried to keep control for a few weeks. She posted a long, tearful message online about ungrateful children and sacrifice. Almost nobody responded. The relatives in that room had seen the papers. They had listened to my father state his worldview in his own voice. Once people watch the truth unfold, whispers have a harder time rebuilding the lie. The education trust became its own slower road. Priya handled it properly on paper the way Ruth would have wanted. Maybe it would end in settlement, maybe not. Either way, it would never be decided by guilt at a dinner table. 6 weeks later, a formal letter arrived from my parents' attorney. The letter stated that Valerie and Dennis had revised their estate documents and that my name no longer appeared among the beneficiaries. I read it at the mailbox and felt something I did not expect. Relief. They had taken away a place that had never truly existed, a seat at a table where I had always been measured. I signed the acknowledgement without anger and mailed it back the next morning. The letter was meant to wound, but it missed because it arrived too late. They had disinherited me emotionally when I was 11. The legal version was just paperwork catching up. I almost admired the symmetry. First, a notarized form sending me away because they could not allocate enough resources, then a lawyer's letter announcing there would be no resources later either. At least this time, I was old enough to sign my own name beneath the truth. Lauren called in May, not for money. She had used Priya's referral, found work, and moved into a small apartment in South Dakota. "I'm on my own feet," she said. "You told me to call when I was, so I'm calling." We talked for nearly an hour, not as if everything was healed. 24 years does not close because one person tells the truth in a restaurant. But the door was open now, and the air coming through it was honest. Lauren and I did not pretend we were instantly close. Some conversations stumbled. Some ended early because one of us touched an old bruise without meaning to. She had guilt that was not hers and habits that were. I had boundaries sharp enough to startle both of us. But we learned to say, "Let's try again," and mean it. That was more honest than any family dinner my mother could have staged. In June, Lauren came to Harold's farm. She watched Ava and Nolan run through the pasture where Eric and I married, where, years earlier, Harold had put a flashlight in my hand during a freezing birth. Lauren wiped her eyes in silence, and nobody turned her tears into evidence. Ruth's old house is rented to a young couple with chickens and a baby who waves from the porch. Sometimes I park across the road and look at it for a minute. I think of a woman saving statements, letters, and photographs in a wooden box because she knew the day might come when love would need evidence. That night in the lantern room, I did not win a family back. I stopped begging one to remember me correctly. Then I went home to the people who had never once done the math.